Don't mind me, I'm just casually jamming after this. Hello there everybody, Sabana92 aka Nightmare, and welcome back to Rose Guns Day Season 3. So, in the last episode, we got to meet Kameda, I don't know, he kind of gives me that vibe, but we met another American general who's, I'm not entirely sure, I forgot what his rank was. Gabriel, and the way he talked, I think SazDX actually kind of pointed this out quite effectively here. Side note, I had to look it up, but Bushun, I think it's pronounced Bushon. All right, I'll try to keep that down. And it's caused by microscopic moss on the cork, which is caused by bad hygiene or treatment of the cork. So my thought is that he has compared the spoiled flavor to Butler's corruption. Hence why Gabriel said it was a sign from God. That is a very, very good observation on that one. I can definitely see the symbolism behind why they did it that way. Oh, this is going to be interesting. And with Gabriel in the picture, this is definitely going to be interesting.
A fine restaurant. I can see why the General chose to frequent it.
I'm surprised. You've got quite an appetite for the morning. Chapter 2, Descent of the Hell's Angel. How fucking ironic. The Major was slender, so Butler had expected a single pancake and some coffee, but those expectations had been far off. Though it was the morning, Gabriel's order was splendid enough to be a dinner.
Margaret Wilson had a saying about the 3 meals. Eat breakfast like a king, eat lunch like a prince, and eat dinner like a pauper.
Basically, eat big, then eat medium, and then eat small.
The desire to eat a lot at night, when all you're going to do is sleep, is a temptation from Satan with the purpose of corrupting men.
Guess that does make sense. It is strange that the start of our working days is our smallest meal, while our largest one is right before we sleep. I like that quote. Is this Margaret person some ancient poet?
She's my grandmother. She was quite strict when it came to food.
Well now, does it mean your name is a... interesting. Sounds like she's quite a respectable person.
So, let us enter our main discussion. To put it in the crude terms you seem to enjoy, let's have an end to this farce.
Fine with me either way, sir.
First, allow me to explain my task. You all seem to think I was dispatched from the GHQ to investigate corruption and collusion. The answer is yes. That's the job the GHQ wants me to do.
On the surface, he had come with the title of Special Officer commissioned for the purpose of eliminating organized crime. In other words, as far as his title went, he was here to preserve public order, just like Butler. However, Butler, as well as all the corrupt officers under the Director General, hadn't accepted that explanation. They had been secretly sure that he had come to sneakily expose their own wrongdoing and collusion with local mafia groups. And now, right after the man showed up, he was confessing that this was the truth. Sounds like you're pretty lucky then. You won't find a city more stable and in touch with its residents than ours.
True. There aren't many cities with its leaders this in touch with its residents.
Guess your job's gonna be over pretty soon. Please let the GHQ know that. The city folk will be happy too.
Conversations with you are quite amusing. I feel like I've slipped into the world of a movie. I've always wanted to take part in a conversation like this once in my life.
Glad to hear it. There's nothing I'd like more than to please you. Butler returned the comment with a full smile, but he wasn't feeling that way on the inside. After all, from the brief conversations they'd had between last night and now, he'd discovered that Gabriel was the type he was worst at making friends with. While he was trying to figure out now, or what he was trying to figure out now, was whether Gabriel was someone he couldn't be friends with, but otherwise harmless. Or else a person who, on top of not being a friend, would bring him obnoxious harm. Which one of the two was this man? We'll have to find out, won't we?
Let's get straight to my conclusion. I have proof that nearly all of the high officers under the Director General, as well as yourself, have been involved with influence peddling.
Surely you must be joking. There was no way he had proof. Butler had managed it all carefully. That was why the Director General and the others couldn't disobey Butler and why they had allowed Butler's side business. Because he had that absolute confidence, Butler was able to answer immediately with a smile and not even a flinch.
However, the truth is that we both have frigid knives at our throats.
Oh? And what do you mean by that?
You have also formed a network of corruption with several GHQ officials, and possess proof of that network as well. And since you have the cunning of a fox, you're using that proof as insurance for your own safety.
Oh? Sounds like you've got quite a few villains out there. The network of corruption that tied Butler to the officials had bestowed them with profit, but Butler had gained proof that they had participated in corruption. If Butler got the axe, then several famous officials in the GHQ upper stratum would go as well. Surely the scale and effects of that would eventually lead to a scandal so large even the general would get sacked. Since they were currently battling the Chinese military for supremacy, the uncovering of such a scandal could only bolster their enemies. Of course, since this might even affect the presidential elections, probes into corruption were always being put off.
Corruption itself is, of course, not something to be allowed.
You know, they say flexibility is the best oil. How about a metaphor? The German army apparently had loads of incredible guns, many of which were very precise, the height of craftsmanship. However, in the extreme cold of the Eastern Front, that precision worked against them, as most of the guns broke and became completely useless.
And the Soviets?
Their guns were, to be blunt, shoddily made, but flexible enough to have a little give. So they withstood both the cold and the battlefield dust and...
Too long. If you can't shorten your example a bit more, it loses its elegance. Anyway, to skip to the end, let's put aside the plans of the gentleman who dispatched me here. I have little interest in individual cases of corruption, collusion, and bribery.
My, how derelict of duty you are.
You misunderstand. My job is to protect the honor of the United States Army, not to expose corruption. Why on earth would I want to dredge up a scandal that hasn't even gone public yet?
Now there's a shock. And here I pictured you as a more saintly dude.
Is it because my name is Gabriel?
No, it's because your hair's white, of course.
I get that a lot. Though my upbringing was the exact opposite of yours, I believe we are fundamentally the same in our thinking. I am no saint. I may be a gentleman, but I have never thought of myself as a good person.
Oh? Are you saying you're a bad person?
Captain, what's the difference between good people and bad people? I think of it this way. If you prioritize public benefit over your own ambitions, you're a good person. Otherwise, you're a bad person.
Definitely seems to make sense to me.
To go further, one might also draw a line between foolish bad people and wise bad people. Foolish bad people prioritize their own ambition.
while wise bad people pretend it's for the public benefit.
My, how wonderful. I feel our wavelengths may have finally matched. Though I could hardly call this meal delicious. It seems this meeting was worth the time.
Finally, Butler thought he could see a bit into the depths of Gabriel's eyes. This major, who was apparently well brought up, probably made it big in the world while being adored by many stiff old men. I'm not entirely sure that's a good thing, being adored by stiff old men. Just saying. However, that was apparently a front. In that sense, yes, this man was surely an even wiser evildoer than Butler.
Getting back to the point. For that reason, I have no interest in investigating your corruption. If I dig you up, the entwined roots will uproot the entire field. After all, my mission is to protect the honor of the United States Army, not tarnish it.
And to use the Japanese proverb, let sleeping gods lie.
Jesus said that even adultery inside one's heart is a sin. However, I believe no human exists who is not sinned inside their hearts. After all, Jesus himself couldn't throw the stone.
Whoa. To think a person with the name of an angel would criticize his master. I like you, Major. I totally get it from your introduction. So, is there any way I can help you?
Indeed there is. That's why I'm having breakfast with you right now. First, I don't want to leave you with the mistaken impression that you and I are friends.
But of course, Major. I would never be so audacious as to think that.
Very well. And I came here as a special officer commissioned for the purpose of eliminating organized crime. In other words, you, as the leader of the local Department of Public Order, are my subordinate and my equipment. Understand?
Understood, sir.
What was your nickname in high school? Bill?
As you guessed, sir.
Then I'll call you Phil when we are alone. I'm going to have you become my property in a literal sense, Phil.
The order had already gone through the Director General that Gabriel would be made City 23's new Director of Public Order with Butler as his aide. That's probably what Gabriel was referring to, but his almost cold smile seemed to indicate something more. I'm not sure I fully understand your meaning.
Remember how you felt when you got your first girlfriend? You wanted to be with her 24 hours a day, didn't you? You wanted to have her body and mind all to yourself, right?
That kinda sounds a bit possessive.
You didn't want her to write or call anyone you didn't know, and you didn't want her going out to meet anyone on her own.
That's a bit overprotective. And kinda borderline abusive, sort of, I think. That. For some reason, it's always been the girl who acted that way, not me. My body must exude some strange aroma. People like that seem to gather around me.
Hearing that makes me jealous of the other girls who tried to monopolize you. And at the same time, I'm pleased to have surpassed them and become your new owner. I guess that means I'm not exactly normal, doesn't it?
I see. At the very least, it would seem you aren't a good person. Clearly.
Bill, you will be under observation 24 hours a day from now on. Of course, your letters and phone calls will be examined. You may not leave my side without my permission. To go further, I would like to forbid you from eating and sleeping without my permission. But I'm not so demonic as that.
Oh, weird. Is this deja vu? Could have sworn my last girlfriend said the same thing.
I only mean for you to devote yourself to your job. There's nothing strange about that. Preserving public order in City 23 is our job, is it not?
As you say, sir. I can't read this guy's thoughts. What's he planning? Butler was starting to feel as though he was having a staring contest with a snake. Fitting. Seriously, all of the religious stuff parallels with this guy.
My title is Special Officer commissioned for the purpose of eliminating organized crime. My original job is to crack down on organized crime, is it not?
There's nothing so shady going on in C23, right?
Bill, you hated farces, did you not? I feel the same. Even the GHQ has been discussing how East Tokyo has gotten too boisterous. The Japanese Mafia Primavera and the Chinese Golden Dragon Society. I know that those two stand at the eye of the typhoon.
We have had some trouble with those two organizations of residents, but it's already been dealt with. I'm pretty sure waking a child that's already been put to bed would run against your doctrine, right, Major?
Not at all. That's why I'm a bad person.
This guy concerns me. Considerably.
Hey, it's your bish boy!
So I told him. That's a sure thing. Pretty clean, and now it's mine.
I don't get it.
As they chatted happily about stupid things, they looked like a pair of close school friends. However, Alan's eyes never once left his binoculars, and Keith's remained on his gun sight. Even though nearly a full day and night had passed since they had set up camp on this roof and entered sniping positions, there was a relaxed atmosphere, as though there were a bunch of female students just chatting in a cafe. Oh, spotted a cat going after her bra. Oh.
Where? Give me a hint.
That's pretty high up. Whoa, careful there. I know it's interesting because it's swinging, but you can't eat that.
I see it. It's probably enjoying it because it's hanging out to dry.
Hey, let's shoot and knock it down.
Easy. But I don't want to waste my bullets on a granny bra like that.
C cup, D cup, got a nosebleed coming up. You're killing me. I'm honest, that was okay, that was an honest giggle there for a minute. I don't know why that made me laugh. Normally, snipers wait by killing their mines and waiting for their prey, like a lizard or a deep-sea fish. Once, even Keith had believed that was the only rule. However, Alan had torn that boring common knowledge apart. Keith believed that Alan's skill, which was no greater or lesser than his own sniping ability, was in his ability to joke. At first, he had mocked it. He'd believed that having a heart as cold as a rock was a requirement for pulling off the perfect job. However, he had been wrong. Rocks are easily cracked and can even crumble. However, willows are different. They may shake in the wind, but they never snap. Keith had been made deeply aware of that on the vicious, parched battlefield. Part of Alan's character that made him never forget humor, no matter the situation, had certainly earned him the displeasure of his bullying superior officers. But despite that, he never let it get to him. And it even earned him the favor of some superiors who found it amusing. If it weren't for Alan, Keith would have never have survived those 3 months fighting all alone, much less the time spent at the prison camp. The harder you try to be a rock, the more fragile you are. When you crack, you'll crumble to pieces in a flash. Only Alan's cheeriness could have given him the strength to survive the harsh life in the army and in that prison camp. Ever since then, Alan was nothing less than the sun. Whenever he couldn't see Alan, it was as though the sun had set and night had fallen. That's some intense devotion there. And when Alan showed himself, it was as though the sun had risen and morning had come. So even though it was getting late and the air was chilly, their brightness remained unchanged. As long as they remained together, the sun would never set. So what's gonna tear them apart, I wonder? What's the time? Oh, I'm glad you asked. Problem time is drawing near. Let's get our spirits up. Roger that. If he doesn't show up, this is gonna turn into a long job. If he doesn't show up by midnight, let's contact Oliver-kun. They won't be able to remain tense for so long. They'd better take shifts. Young kids got no endurance. I feel like a private first class. There was no trace of weariness about them. Relaxation and concentration. The combination of those two things made this pair geniuses at sniping. Then they both tensed up at the same moment. The headlights of several cars were coming down the street in front of the hotel. There were 3 cars. They all stopped in front of the hotel. The snipers had had the hotel under constant observation since the previous night, and they had never seen 3 cars stop at this desolate hotel at once. That's not what we'd expected. The bosses said Davis would be alone. It's fine. This just makes it easier to tell. Sniping was the right decision. If the plan is to take him out at close range, they would have taken us out instead. Normally the best plan for taking Davis out would be to ambush him in the hotel. However, they had made the correct decision in sniping, after considering Davis's good instincts and the chance that he would bring a large group of underlings like this. Sup, bitches? Suited, grim-faced, obviously well-muscled men came out of the cars one after another. With their hands clearly in their pockets, they scattered around the area, glaring at all parts of the dim street. The bosses didn't want witnesses, right? Yeah, we were told to keep them as few as humanly possible. But if we let this chance slip by, who knows if we'll get another? I know. The bosses said not letting them get away was our first priority. So, do we take them? Though, if we don't want witnesses, maybe we should take them all out. One shot will be fine. Let's just take him. Let's take just him down. After that, when he gets crazy and the police show up, I'm sure they'll run home. Wonder how much it's gonna cost to have Butler to hush this up. How much it's gonna cost? You don't mean we're paying, right? If we take him out without getting the captain involved, they say we get a bonus. Hey, never heard about that. From what they'd heard beforehand, this man was a swindler pretending to be a young businessman, but he supposedly wasn't connected to any organization. They hadn't expected him to come with such a large guard. No, he might have just brought bodyguards so he could act important. However, they had heard about his good instincts. He might have gotten bodyguards because he predicted an attack from somewhere. After confirming that the surrounding area was safe, one of the men knocked on the window of the middle car.
There's no one in sight. It's safe.
You're sure, right? There's not even a cat looking about out there, right?
No, of course not. Except that there's one cat that was kind of running away with some granny's bra. It was kind of weird. If there had been one, we'd have chased it away.
Guards probably interpreted Davis's caution as cowardice. Davis seemed extremely displeased that they took it this way, and he gazed all around through the window, looking discouraged. He even glanced at the roof of the building Alan and Keith were on, but at this distance and in this darkness, there was no chance of him spotting him. Davis opened the door a bit violently as he tried to prove he wasn't a coward, and he got out of the car. That stupid woman. I told her to get her luggage ready and wait in the front hall. She's still getting her makeup on, isn't she? Damn, this is why you can't trust women. Shoot him! Oh, thank you. Is that him? Checking. Give me additional confirmation, please. Alan was checking the target's facial features with his binoculars. It was almost certainly Davis, but they couldn't afford to shoot an uninvolved person, even if it was a mistake. Keith's sniper scope could confirm that the man coming out of the car was their leader, but it couldn't accurately pick out his facial features. If he walked a few steps more, the lights of the hotel entrance would shine on his face. Then they'd be able to confirm that he was Davis Degawa himself. Silently, Keith's gun barrel and sights focused on the top of the target's head. Oh my god, those eyes. Lots of people close the eye not on their sights when shooting. But Keith was different. Keith's right eye accurately lined up the target's head through the sights, and his left eye judged the distance between him and the target. With his right and left eyes looking at different things, he viewed the world between himself and the target in 3 dimensions. It was a special sniping technique he had learned from his father, one which had been passed down through his family for generations. Is Keith's last name Armstrong?
This sniping technique has been passed down the Armstrong line for generations.
One step at a time, the target approached the light of the lobby. The light seeping out of the lobby started at the target's feet and slowly rose up his body. All right. The face was clearly lit up by the lights. There was no doubt. It was Davis Degawa himself. A street light was in the way. Let him walk a few more steps. Huh? At that moment, they suddenly heard the screech of tires. Davis was shocked and he rushed into the shadows like a scared cat. The sudden, rapid motion was too much even for Keith to track. What? What happened? There's a car coming! What's going on? With screeching tires, a single beat-up car came sliding down the street. It wasn't able to make the turn and it came to a stop after pathetically slamming its side against a fire hydrant. The guards all drew their pistols, standing ready with killing intent. Then several young people got out of the car, scratching their heads. Oliver? What are they doing? Why are they getting in the way? Dang. Couldn't make the turn. The heck's wrong with you? Oh. The heck's wrong with you, Todd? Next time I drive. What is it? Who are these people?
Well, they look like a bunch of dumb kids.
I'm sure they were just driving around some car they stole. No, I don't like this. I have a bad feeling about this. The top of my head itches when things like this happen. By now, Davis wasn't even hiding his caution. He curled up into a ball, unashamed of looking like a coward, while the guards formed a human wall as he dashed into the hotel. It's no use. There's no chance they'd find a chance to snipe like this. What? What's going on? I don't get it. It probably means the situation's changed. They'd only exchanged a few words with Oliver, but he had been introduced as a person worthy of Wayne's trust. Such a man would never interfere with a plan to eliminate Primavere's enemies, nor would he screw up. This was probably a message to stop the attack. Alan and Keith hadn't told the others where they were sniping from, so this is probably the only way to prevent the attack. Oh. After that, there were no more opportunities to snipe Davis. He hid his body behind a human wall of guards, curled up like a hedgehog as he dashed out of the hotel with his woman. Alan and Keith could only look on regretfully as the line of cars drove away. Uh-oh. They left the roof and met up with Oliver's group. Oliver Kuhn, what exactly is going on here?
We received an urgent message from the boss to suspend the plan.
By boss, do you mean Wayne Kuhn? Or our boss?
No. I heard it was from the grand boss.
What's going on? I don't have a clue. Just when we'd finished waiting a whole day just to plant a bullet in the top of his head. I'm beat. I want to take a shower. Don't get sulky, partner. Let's hear why this thing got suspended. We don't know the details either, but it sounds like he's got someone's backing. Backing? By someone big enough to stop the Great Primavera, which controls City 23? Didn't know there were any names that big left in the city. Who is it?
Fucking Alfred! Hey, it's me, Alfred Akagi. Long time no see, everybody. No need to worry, for I am healthy, energy, vitality. Whoa! That's nice. Sounds like you're in as high spirits ever. I've heard the rumors about you. Sounds like you and your henchmen have been running about robbing banks and really raking it in. Money's important, I have to give my henchmen a feast. I need many, many monies. I know it's been a while, so let me explain. We've changed a bit since you last threatened us. Now we're a luxury establishment, even employing the girls favored by the great Director General. Of course I know. Primavera has grown magnificently. But me, I'm the kind of man who burns more and more the biggest my enemies are. You haven't changed, crazy Alfred.
No shit! I did not expect this wild child to suddenly return. The Alfred family had supposedly dispersed. However, he was a persistent man. He had never surrendered himself. He had restarted from square one, trying to raise his flag, and had steadily gathered money and henchmen. Most villains had huddled under the big tree of Primavera, but there were quite a few who didn't. Plenty of villains felt more comfortable with Alfred's crazy personality instead of Rose's pretty talk. After gathering up those people who just wanted to run wild, Alfred had returned.
Davis did go as a friend of mine. If something unlucky were to happen to him, no matter what it is, I will consider it Primavera's doing, and I'll have very much revenge to give you as a present. So, remember that kind of crazy guy? Yeah, he's back. Nobody expects the Alfred. Didn't think that crazy man would pop up here.
Why can't he die? We should have finished him off when we had a chance. What do we do? If we're going to war with him, we should start soon.
He's got a strange sort of charisma. If we're careless, he'll start calling in all sorts of troublesome people.
I did have a connection between Davis and Alfred in the back of my mind. But who could have guessed it would show up here?
He's got no reins. When he fights all out, no matter who it is.
I know. That's why he's crazy Alfred.
Even now, after becoming a force large enough to control City 23, Alfred was a threat to them. After all, common sense didn't work on him. This he's a mad lad. He didn't care about his opponent's rank. He would bite anyone. It was probably more suited to the name Mad Dog than Wayne. Shit, he kind of is, now you think about it. If an all-out war were permissible, he was no match for them, of course. However, this was a slightly nervous period. They had to gain public support to establish their association. They wanted to avoid darker matters as much as possible.
Yeah, good luck with him around.
It's just how it happened in my time. Davis started talking big, and then Alfred picked a fight. It's the same thing again. We should get those problem erasers Maurice is so proud of to finish him off along with Davis.
Yeah, that's our best option. But he's no fool himself. I'm sure if he knows our current situation, or he knows our goddammit, I know how to English, he must have picked this fight while knowing we probably had a few assassins with us.
True. It probably won't be easy to kill him.
James, how did you resolve your trouble last time?
Money. He's incredibly insane, but he won't act so crazy that he kicks in money away.
Was that really all it took to make him go away?
Of course, there was more to it than money, but it took considerable effort.
We cannot postpone. I want the decision for the association's establishment to be made at our next meeting.
Then there's no time to lose. We can't let anyone get in Rose-san's way any longer. Okay, I'll have my people find his hideout. We'll find it even if it's in the sewers.
Wait. In this case, we don't even have time for that.
But Richard-san, what else can we...
Calm yourself. Bullets are not the only form of ammunition.
Meaning...
I mean we should follow James's precious advice. Contact Alfred. Tell him I wish to resolve this through negotiations.
Richard-san, are you planning to do whatever that crazy guy says?
Money is also ammunition. If you don't fire it off at the right time, then when will you ever? Leave it to me. I'll show you that violence can be quelled with wealth. 2 days later. Well, that didn't work out.
I don't know, part of me feels like this is probably not going to work this time. Huh? Yuki-chan, you're here already? Wow, you've never shown up first before.
Oh, thank goodness, Alan!
Whenever they met for a date, Alan had always arrived first. This is the first time she had beaten him, and so early too.
I'm really glad your dangerous job ended safely.
It's not exactly over though. Well, you know, trash never really goes away. The higher-ups had postponed Davis's sniping while they tried to resolve things with Alfred. Of course, Alan had used that precious break to invite Yuki to a date. But I'm glad you're safe too.
Huh?
You said you were going to a conference with some mafia types, right? I was worried you might not make it back safely. He'd probably been worried that she as a normal civilian might have gotten into trouble while changling with Primavera's bosses. However, she was Lee Meiju's little sister. She wasn't in the Mafia herself, but she had the backing of the GDS. Alan didn't know that she wasn't a person Primavera could touch easily.
Thank you. But I told you, didn't I? I'm used to dealing with people like that. The discussion did get fierce, but it ended with us peacefully drinking together before going home.
Whew, that's awesome. Nice going, Yuki-chan. Sounds like you'll make it big in the future. So, let's head to that restaurant as promised. I've got reservations.
Of course. But since I'm in a good mood, let's start by giving you 10 points.
Whoa, they keep rolling in. I want to ask you where you live next.
What's wrong?
Alan's joking face suddenly went stiff. However, it quickly softened again and he picked up his pace while putting his arm across Meishu's shoulder. Meishu?
What's going on? I'm in high heels today, so go a bit slower.
You know anyone in Chinatown?
Huh?
2 Chinese thugs have been following us for the last 2 blocks. Probably underlings of the GDS. Any idea why they might be here?
No, not at all.
Alan realized that he was probably being followed. Primavera knew Crazy Alfred was backing Davis. But what if Alfred was in turn being backed by the GDS? That's the Chinese for you. So you pretend to support the new association while scheming to crush it at the same time? Now there's a nice negotiating trick. At the same time, Meishu realized that she was being followed. Her brother had apparently guessed that the phone call the other day was from his sister's boyfriend. He must have sent some of his young troops to see what sort of man she was dating. Now I need to approve of your boyfriend before you do anything else, or else my iguana is going to get really upset. You don't want to see him when he gets upset.
Sheesh! This is why I hate the Mafia. Brother, you can just hit your head on a piece of mabo tofu and die.
Yuki-chan, did you tell anyone about the restaurant we were going to today?
No, I told no one.
So, what to do? He knew she hated violence. However, that might be unavoidable depending on how those men acted. What should I do? Should I just confess already that I love a good fight? Of course I'll try to avoid violence as much as possible in the future, but just this once, I may have to ask her to let it slide. Meishu could hear what Alan was thinking without him even opening his mouth.
Oh no, Alan's ready to go at them. He's such a vigorous person after all. I guess it's only normal for a man to want to chase away suspicious people and show off his strength to his girlfriend. But Alan, you've got to stop. You're an ordinary citizen and they're in the Mafia. They're also just itching to make a name for themselves.
If Alan got beaten to a pulp and she had to intervene, that would wound his pride. And if by some miracle Alan took them down, he would have to face a terrible reprisal later.
Hey, Alan, are you sure it isn't your imagination?
My imagination? No, it's not. Those glinting eyes, they're filled with killing intent, you know?
Are you sure you aren't just imagining it because you want to show off to me? Would you mind waiting here a second? I'm going to go talk to them.
What? That's dangerous. Who knows what they do to you?
Trust me. Leave it to me. I'll prove it's just a misunderstanding. If they try to do something violent to me, I give you permission to act. See? Does that work for you?
Be careful, okay? You can never trust the Chinese. Even Alan wasn't 100% sure he was being tailed. 70% at most. Their traditional GDS clothing stood out when they walked in the middle of the street like this, so he might be mistaken in thinking that they were being followed. Come to think of it, what would be the point of them tailing me? When the GDS moves, it's simple. Bang! That should have been all. However, just in case, Alan quietly released the safety in his brain. They lay a finger on her. I'll show no mercy. Meishu glanced back to make sure Alan was waiting obediently. Good boy. I was getting ready to say good boy, and immediately, why do I make commentary at this point?
There's a good boy. Just wait there for a bit.
When Meishu approached their two stalkers, they pretended not to notice her, looking the other way and putting cigarettes in their mouths.
Okay, nice work, boys. Did my brother put you up to this? Don't play dumb. If you do, I'll tell brother you touched my butt.
Please forgive us on this! The boss ordered us to guard you from afar.
No, thank you. No need to butt into my personal life. Tell my brother I said that.
That won't do. Please tell that to the boss directly if you would, young miss.
Oh, of course, I'll be grabbing him by the collar and telling him, so please go home. If you don't run off before I count to 3, I'll cry, molester, and make sure brother hears about it too. Got it? Here I go.
Yeer-san. Yeer-san? Yeer-san. What does that mean? They couldn't afford to have rumors going around that they had messed with the boss's sister. The two of them scrambled away. Alan's eyes went wide as he watched this scene.
They were lost. I told them where to go and they dashed off.
Wow, Yuki-chan, you really are cosmopolitan. You even speak Chinese fluently.
Well, yeah. Didn't I tell you? I know 7 languages. Of course, Chinese is one of them.
Still, I'm glad. I was here shuddering, wondering if they'd suddenly take you hostage or something. You get villains everywhere, but the Chinese are particularly ruthless. You better be careful, huh?
That's not true. There are plenty of Chinese gentlemen.
Well, if you're talking about friends from school, they probably were. But the Chinese people hanging around C23 are all creeps. You should be on your guard.
Shut up. It's the creeps who are dangerous, not the Chinese in general. That's discrimination.
Well, I'm not saying that all the Chinese are villains, but it's still safer to assume they are when you're living around here. Oof. Oof. Ooh. 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 Alan, discrimination. That is a no-no. That is a big no-no, my dude. Oof. Ugh. Okay, first off, I know it's just because of the situation and the setting of this story. But, oh, Alan, oof, that's a big no-no. I mean, I'll give you that. Thank you, Yuki, for at least kind of calling him out on that. Good job. Good job. Good. Let's go a little bit further. Even though Meishu had been looking forward to this date so much, the food didn't seem delicious today. Alan's casually spoken views of the Chinese had driven an insurmountable wedge between the two of them. Right.
When I first met Alan, I spoke in fluent Japanese, so he naturally believed I was Japanese. I might have confessed to being Chinese right then and there, but I wanted to see his amiable smile a bit longer, so unfortunately I lied. Meishu was no fool. Knew of the Chinese-Japanese relationship as members of winning and losing countries. She announced that she was Chinese. That would almost certainly estrange him. We might never get to see him again. Thinking that, she had lied, saying she was a girl who just returned from a long period of study overseas and therefore ignorant about Japan. Of course, she hadn't planned on fooling him forever. She had intended to confess her nationality someday. In that case, you can't let it get you down, Lee Meishu. You have to straighten out his misconceptions and prejudice against the Chinese. Even I half believe the Japanese were all chum until I studied overseas. Chum and chum and chum and... The fuck is that word? The Chinese? Well, lots of them are pretty fun guys, you know. When you're drunk, it doesn't matter if you're Japanese or Chinese. Then what about when you're sober? Do you think we can get along well with the Chinese? I doubt it. You know they hate us, right? There was a war after all. Both sides hated each other, right? After all, we fought it out in China, but they never got to fight it out in Japan. To the Chinese, it probably feels like they just got beat up one-sidedly, but never had a chance to pay Japan back. On the inside, the Japanese of this period probably felt that both parties bore responsibility, and the Japanese should be given a break, since that's how war worked. After all, the damage caused across Japan by the Great Disaster was no more or less than what China had suffered. However, that had only been a natural disaster. It wasn't a counterattack by the Chinese military. In truth, the Chinese of that period weren't completely satisfied. After all, the Japanese military had attacked the Chinese mainland. The Chinese military had only been resisting that invasion, and when they were finally ready to strike back, the Great Disaster broke out in Japan, which surrendered all on its own. In other words, Japan had punched China all on its own, and as soon as China tried to fight back, Japan slipped, fell, broke its leg, and then decided for themselves that it was time to make up. Ouch. There were many among the city folk of Chinese descent who weren't satisfied with the humanitarian ceasefire caused by the Great Disaster. Yuki-chan, I know you aren't a fan of violence, but do you know the difference between fighting as a form of communication and simple violence? Violence is a form of communication? That's not a concept I'm familiar with. Okay, if you punch someone in the back all on your own, and then keep punching them until they crumple, that's simple violence. That's not a fight. That's a barbarous assault, the worst sort of crap. But those fight festivals, where drunks scuffle with each other playfully, are different. Do you know why? Because you get hit just as often as they hit you. No matter how hard they smack you down, you've already punched them several times. That's why you can feel equal when it's all over. Alan's fights were always like that. He would punch and go wild. However, he'd been hit just as many times. He subconsciously gauged the difference in strength between him and his opponent and naturally balanced it out. So the people Alan fought with always truly felt that they were fighting on even terms, and they couldn't bring themselves to hate him. I see. If you were just getting hit one-sidedly, you would never feel that way. Berlin was laid waste by the Allied forces, right? I think that's why the French were put at ease a bit. But the Chinese never fired a bullet back at Tokyo. Of course they aren't satisfied. Street fights and wars are the same in that way. When you hit and get hit, but both sides are damaged equally, it becomes possible to rub your bruises and laugh together afterward. However, that never happened in the war between us and the Chinese. In some regard, it's like the Chinese. They suffered so much, and right as the moment that they were finally about to get some sort of revenge, they saw that Japan was suddenly destroyed by this great disaster, and while they basically got to see Japan in a state that they wished that they could see it, it wasn't by their own hands, so they felt immensely empty. I think that's kind of what they're getting at here. That's right. The Chinese had nowhere to direct the pain, anger, and sadness they had felt during the war. There we go. Because the war was over. So the fist they had raised in anger and sadness was still hanging there in the air. Revenge against the hated enemy which laid waste to their homeland. That feeling had been put on hold all this time. The way I see it, that great disaster will leave a wound for 100 years. One that can't be repaired with concrete. I'm sure that war should have been fought to the very end. If the Chinese and American militaries had landed on the Japanese mainland with all guns ablazing, ready to take their revenge, then maybe they would finally be satisfied and feel as though both sides were on an even footing. Of course, this is all just the irresponsible view of a drunk. If the world Alan envisioned did exist, that probably wouldn't have healed the anger and sadness of the Chinese or the Japanese. In war, there is no ideal if.
At the very moment it breaks out, it's already a tragedy that can never be taken back. Now, if only other people understood that. The Japanese feel that both parties bear responsibility, and the war's already over, so they feel no resentment, even though they lost. But to the Chinese, the Japanese surrendered on their own terms, and they never got to punch back. The anger in their guts hasn't subsided. I'll bet that difference in tone between the two countries gets more and more twisted over the next 100 years, turning into something disastrous. Meishu was surprised by Alan's cool analysis. He's not just a meathead, he's actually kind of smart. He had calmly understood at least some of the feelings she had thought a Japanese man would never understand. All of the Chinese felt some remaining sadness and anger towards the Japanese because of the war. The war was over. It wasn't permitted for them to resolve this problem through violent means. They wanted to take revenge by other means, but no matter how hard they tried, it could never compare to the losses suffered in that gruesome war. She knew full well that this was a negative emotion, not a cultural problem. However, there's no energy as simple as anger. It releases exactly as much energy as it receives. That anger would never go away unless they, by their own hands, reduced Tokyo to a pile of rubble like Chongqing. Chongqing? And since they couldn't do this, their anger would never go away. Of course, they also understood that doing such a thing wouldn't heal anyone. If the Japanese have trouble understanding their anger, they should think of it this way. Let's say the Chinese military attacked Japan, reducing all of it to rubble. Then, when the Japanese military resisted and was about to strike back, a major disaster strikes China. The Japanese government accepts an unconditional ceasefire on humanitarian grounds. If the Chinese then said, "Hey, war's over, so let's all get along," would the Japanese be able to accept it? We've paid reparations, so forgive our indiscriminate massive air raids of Tokyo, okay? Man, those Japanese guys sure complained about that old war a lot, even after taking our money. If they demanded that they be forgiven for trampling on Japan's human rights, it'd be hard to do. It's hard to forgive. The Japanese in the ruins of Tokyo would probably shed frustrated tears, wanting to make Beijing meet the same fate. And unless they could have equal revenge against their enemies, it would never stop eating at them. At the moment, China and its countrymen were enjoying the feeling of being a victor nation, so their anger towards Japan had subsided somewhat. Japanese were curled up as members of a defeated nation, and as long as they stayed down, the Chinese could probably keep their anger tucked away in their hearts. However, the Japanese felt that both parties had received their due punishment. Japan had been damaged no less than China, and they had paid reparations, so they felt all debts had been settled. Some even felt that, since infrastructure had been built under Japanese rule in China, the Chinese should even be grateful. 100 years from now, Japan would surely try to erase the memory of the war, calling it focusing on the future or something, and proclaim that they'd left behind their status as a defeated nation. When that happened, the Chinese people of the future probably wouldn't accept it. After all, they'd been able to postpone their anger at the Japanese because the latter was still hanging its head as a defeated nation. Meishu was vaguely starting to realize something. This was a fatal difference in culture between China and Japan. The concept of apology had a fatally different value to the two nations. For the Japanese, an apology is something you accept when you receive it. Of course, it isn't easy to accept it while you're still pissed off at someone. However, accepting it anyway and giving forgiveness is thought of as an action that shows off your tolerance. On the other hand, if you keep refusing an apology, you'll be thought of as an immature, and people will look down on you even if you're the one being apologized to. Also, if you do accept the apology, then the crime is totally forgotten and it's supposed to be unmanly and shameful if you ever bring it up again. However, this is only how the Japanese think, of course. Chinese think differently. In China, an apology is something carried out when one claims to have been reborn as a new human, one who won't commit the same sin again. Only when it's acknowledged that you've been reborn will the crime of your previous life be forgiven. Therefore, if the criminal forgets his regret and returns to how he was before his rebirth, that pardon will naturally be rescinded, and the criminal will go back to being treated like a criminal. So the Chinese would continuously check whether Japan still remained reborn, as a new country repentant of its war sins. However, to the Japanese, the 1978 Sino-Japanese Friendship Treaty meant that China had accepted Japan's apology. So, according to Japanese culture, China was acting dishonorably whenever it brought up a sin it had once forgiven. China, following Chinese culture, decided that its forgiveness of Japan should be rescinded since the latter had forgotten its regret and was trying to return to a pre-war state. And the biggest tragedy is that neither side understands this difference between their cultures. To a Westerner, it's hard to imagine that there can be such a difference in values between these two neighboring countries, who even write with the same characters. But please understand one thing. Westerners aren't the only ones.
How can we ever reach a mutual understanding with the Chinese?
It's impossible, isn't it? Ooh. It came so quick that Meishu was ticked off. Alan, realizing he had misspoken, grimaced and hurriedly tried to smooth things over. But you know what? In this world, there's all kinds of people that you just can't get along with. Instead of worrying about not getting friendly with people like that, it's a better use of your time to search for a new friend instead.
But in reality, Tokyo is currently filled with many Chinese and Japanese people living side by side. It'd be one thing if there was an ocean separating them. But since we're living in the same city, can we really ignore the problem like that?
I don't think we can. I believe we can understand each other as neighbors living in the same city. Like that overseas education isn't anything to sneeze at. I really think what you're saying is wonderful. So, do you know about the porcupine dilemma? Or whatever that was called?
Porcupine dilemma? I'm surprised you'd heard of such a thing.
Ouch! When two porcupines try to huddle together, they injure each other with the quills all over their body. They want to be close to their neighbors, but if they get too close, they'll end up hurting each other. In the end, even though they acknowledge each other as neighbors, it's desirable for them to keep a proper distance between themselves as they interact. At least that's how the fable goes. There's no need to get too close. If you do, both sides will end up hurt. The Japanese think of the Chinese as obstinate guys who keep hating us for the war no matter how much time passes. The Chinese think of the Japanese as ungrateful people who don't think the Chinese enough for postponing the revenge that the Japanese deserve.
Then why don't the Japanese keep giving honest apologies? They can just keep saying they regret starting the war.
I think that's the right thing to do. I think Japan will continue to do that in the near future, and it'll eventually calm down. But that's like watering plants in a desert. It'll never end. It'll be fine for us in the war generation, but future Japanese people born after the war won't understand why they're apologizing for a war they had nothing to do with. The sins of the ancestors must fall upon the descendants, apparently. Kind of like how the sins of the father fall on the child. Never liked those. They'd be treated more or less like slaves, forced to eternally pay off a debt that they carry since the time of their birth.
I'm sure even the Chinese wouldn't go that far. The Chinese just want to see a heartfelt apology from the Japanese. I think.
They certainly don't want to make them slaves. I wonder, in the first place, is there some agreed upon line where if the Japanese do this much, the Chinese will forgive them? There's nothing like that. They're only postponing their anger while the Japanese are curled up as a defeated nation. They will never forgive. That's all. And so, it's impossible for the Japanese and Chinese to ever understand each other. QED. Ouch. Bang. It was the sound of Meishu slamming her hands against the table and rising to her feet. It rang throughout the restaurant and all the waiters and customers turned to look. Why are you making so many one-sided assumptions about the Chinese? Yuki-chan? Yeah, there was a war and a whole lot of people died. I'm sure there's all sorts of grudges from that which can never be wiped away. But we should still be able to understand each other. We've interacted with each other for over 1,000 years, right? We've shared many bits of culture and advanced our own particular cultures, making us like a family that acknowledges one another. It's idiotic that those 1,000 years of interaction and friendship could all be lost because of a single war. Of course, I know there's a lot of anger and sadness out there that can never be healed.
A lot of Chinese and Japanese people were hurt. They bore resentment and sadness. I know they wouldn't even want to look at each other for some time. In that case, we just need to give them time to cool their heads, then start back at square one, looking for a way to hold hands again. So, what gives you the right and qualifications to decide on your own that we'll never understand each other? Jesus. Meishu's shoulders heaved with her breathing, and tears fell from her eyes. A feeling of intense regret rushed through Alan. He hadn't said that because he wanted to make her look like this. She took her wallet out of her handbag, put a new 500 Japanese dollar note on the table, and spun around. However, she tripped on the high heels she still wasn't used to wearing and crouched down on the ground. Alan rushed towards her and offered her hand, but Meishu slapped it away, sobbing. Alan couldn't do anything but stand there, stunned. Yep, I'm going to end it there on a very sour note. But yeah, that's the thing that I was really afraid of. Like, although, I don't know, I didn't expect it to be that explosive there. But that really, seriously, I think I've said this before, but their relationship, it was a ticking time bomb waiting to go off, and we finally got to see the explosion itself. And I'm not entirely sure which side I can totally agree with. I think it's kind of like looking at the two sides of a coin. Alan he may seem like a very positive individual, but whenever it comes to stuff like this, it seems like he's very much pessimistic. While Meishu, she's much more of an optimist that she thinks one day they could come to understand each other. Damn. Man, if they reacted this much with, I don't know, I mean, with Alan's views on the Chinese itself, oh boy, makes me kind of worried about how they are going to react whenever they learn the truth about each other. But anyway, I do like Alan and Yuki's actual interactions, despite this one ending on an incredibly sour note, and I do look forward to seeing what else they have in store. I am admittedly worried about them, but we'll just have to wait and see what the hell happens after that. But anyway, if you all like this, be sure to let me know. I apologize for ending it on a sad note, but I feel like that was a very good place to stop. But anyway, thank you all very much for watching, and I will definitely see all of you guys in the next video.